Yo, 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 people and patrons of the night, it is your boy, BD, and I am the host of the Horror Tavern, and today we're going to be looking at the second installment in the Creature Feature short story / novella collection by Amazon Original Stories. I covered the first book yesterday in my review, so go click on my channel and check out the review that I did yesterday, but today I'm going to be talking about the next short story in this collection. So without further ado, welcome to the Horror Tavern YouTube channel. This is my spot. This is a one-stop shop for all things horror media related. So make sure that you take a seat, you grab a drink as we explore the limitless cavern that is the horror genre. Now, the reason I picked up this Creature Feature short story collection was because, again, I thought it was very interesting, and I saw that on Amazon Original Stories, this was free to read on Kindle if you had Prime. So I decided to pick it up because it focuses on Creature Feature. Creature Feature is one of my favorite subgenres in all of horror. I absolutely love cool monster action. I've just always been a fan of that kind of thing. And yesterday I talked about the first book, which was written by Joe Hill, one of my favorite horror authors, called The Pram. But today I'm going to be talking about the second short story in this collection, which is by Grady Hendrix. Now, for those of you who don't know Grady Hendrix, he's written some pretty famous horror books, some of the titles that I very much recognize, such as How to Sell a Haunted House, The Southern Book Club Guide to Slaying Vampires, and arguably his most famous work that I think a bunch of you guys will be very familiar with and kind of perk up once you hear it, is he actually wrote the Paperbacks from Hell book, talking about the twisted fiction of 70s and 80s horror. So yeah, he wrote the Paperback from Hell book that a lot of you probably may own or know about. So this is the guy responsible for that. And the short story that he wrote in this Creature Feature group is called Ankle Snatcher. Now, Ankle Snatcher, by the cover, can kind of give you an idea as to what the story is going to dive into. Yesterday, when I talked about The Pram, it shows a picture of a baby carriage, so you get some idea that it's going to be some baby horror. In this one, Ankle Snatcher, by the title of the story and the picture of a dark space under somebody's bed, you can get the idea this might be dealing with the B-Man, for those of you who may or may not know. The one that lurks under the bed, in the closet, and such. The boogeyman is the focus of this story. So this story basically talks about a young man named Marcus. Marcus kind of works in like social work groups. He's part of like some Samaritan kind of company thing that he's working at and doing social work for. And by working there, he ended up meeting this girl that he very much likes. And you open up with him being at a bar. He's kind of spending some time with her. They got some good banter going on. You can tell that they got a connection. They like each other. He thinks that the girl is very special. And, you know, she doesn't drink. He's known for drinking, so they, even though they have differences, you know, they start sparking up some conversation. And eventually, when instant casual conversation, he asks why she doesn't drink. She ends up being comfortable around him and reveals the fact that her dad was an alcoholic, and on Christmas, he ended up, you know, spending their present money on drugs, and then he went to go steal the presents from the neighbor's house and then try to play that off as presents for the kids. And he ended up getting basically kicked out of the house by the mom, and then he became essentially a bum. So that's why she doesn't drink. She doesn't want to end up being like him, and it was hard growing up for her seeing that. And then after the main character Marcus hears this, he decides to open up to her as to why he drinks, or why he's also traumatized in a sense, just to make her feel better because he knows that she's a little uncomfortable right now. So he tells her that when I was 6 years old, my dad ended up killing my mom. And he explains how everything is pretty much a blur involving his mom. He remembers things like the smell of, you know, her shampoo. He remembers her clothes. He remembers her presence. But it's all kind of a blur all before the night that it happened. But the night that the homicide took place, he remembers very clearly. Because what ended up happening was he woke up in the middle of the night at 6 years old, and he woke up basically panting and sweating really hard. That made him think that there was some sort of presence or something that sparked him awake in this dark room of his. And then all of a sudden the light clicks on, and his dad walks into the room, and he sees that his dad, basically shaved. He's got no blood on him. He's got no signs of any type of struggle or damage or trying to do something, but he looks at his eyes, and his dad has got these, crazy zoned out eyes, and he's looking at his son, and he tells his date that his dad had actually told him that he wasn't responsible for killing his mom. The boogeyman took their mom. And then he reveals later on that his dad didn't even call it the boogeyman. He specifically called it the ankle snatcher. Now, we're not talking about Michael Jordan. We're not talking about Kobe Bryant, RIP. We're talking about the ankle snatcher, as in that's in the name for the boogeyman given in the story. So obviously, the police could not find the body of the mom. And eventually what happened was the dad ended up driving away and trying to go to Florida. And then the police caught him, I think, in Georgia. And when they tried to look into the trunk to see if maybe he took the body of the mom, and that's why they couldn't find it, they didn't find anything in the trunk, and he wouldn't reveal where he buried the mom, even though he clearly told his son that, I'm not the one who killed her. The ankle snatcher did it. And he explained to his kid that the reason why it got mom was because she stepped out of the bed and forgot to switch on the lamp light that's next to their nightstand. And when you walk out of bed without turning on the light, that's when the ankle snatcher grabs you by the ankle and pulls you down into the bed and does God knows what. So ever since then, at that moment, because of the fact that Marcus was so young, he's been traumatized and superstitious, and he never gets out of bed without turning on the light, even though he's very much aware that his dad, a lot of the time with these murderers, they create this fantastical story and they blame the victim, so he thinks that his dad's just making it up. He might have had some mental thing go on that he made up this whole story, or he thinks, or he blanked out at some point and he ends up blaming the mom even though he clearly committed the murder. So Marcus has always resented his father for the fact that he could never take accountability, the fact that he ruined his life, ruined the family and all that. So after opening up and telling the story, he didn't tell all the details. He tells you the details from an inner monologue, but he doesn't tell all the details to his date. So they kind of bond over that little bit of a connection, and he takes her back to his apartment, and they start getting it on. They start, having a good time. And as she goes to the bathroom, she gets up out of the bed, and he starts to freak out. He starts to get scared, and he's about to go turn on the lamp because he's superstitious, but she sees his jerky movements, and she turns around, and he looks at her, and he sees, how gorgeous she looks, how beautiful she is, how nice her body is. He likes the tattoos on her, and there's street light coming in from the window that just illuminates her, and he realizes that, I think I really love this girl, and he's basically taken aback. And before he can do anything, she gets back on him, she starts kissing him, and then walks away to the bathroom. But he got so mesmerized in that moment because he realized this girl might be the one for me after all these years. And he starts thinking about, my whole life I've lived in paranoia. My whole life I've never been really an adult. I've never really stepped out of my shell. But now I feel like maybe this is a true sense of belonging. And eventually she finishes going to the bathroom. She walks out, and she's about to go hop onto the bed, and he's got his arms out ready to catch her. And then all of a sudden her eyes go wide, and she falls backward and hits the ground with a giant smack that shakes the apartment walls. And he freaks out, and he leans over the bed to look at her, and he sees that as she's laid out on the ground naked, there's a pale man's hand grabbed onto her ankle and flexing on it and holding it. And then as he's looking down at this pale man's hand, he starts freaking out, wondering, how long has this guy been under my bed? Has he been listening to us the whole time? How did I not know he's under there? Then he sees the man's hand start flexing and gripping the ankle hard and starts trying to drag her under the bed. And all of a sudden, Marcus leaps out. He holds onto her, and then a second arm comes out, grabs onto her other I think he tries pulling her under. she gets pulled under, and he's trying to hold on to his girl, but the figure under the bed is too strong. And next thing you know, as she's being dragged under, she takes her right foot and kicks it up against the mattress and shakes the bed Marcus is on. But she holds her right foot up against the mattress to try to make sure that there's some leverage, that whoever's under here can't pull her under. And then obviously the second arm comes out and grabs onto her right ankle and tries, pulling the leg off of the mattress so that way the person could drag her under. And then Marcus is trying to, hold on to her shoulders, trying to hold on to her arms, trying to keep her up, trying to make sure she doesn't get pulled under by this guy and murdered. And then a third arm comes out and grabs onto her right thigh. And all of a sudden, Marcus gets weirded out. And then a fourth and fifth arm comes out and grabs onto her left leg that's already under the bed, trying to get some leverage. And Marcus starts freaking out. He's wondering, how many people are under my bed? And then a sixth arm comes out, latches onto her right leg, and now there's three arms, three pale man's arms, gripping and flexing and holding onto her legs. And finally it breaks her tension and pulls her under, and she gets dragged under there half to the waist. And now Marcus is upside down, holding onto her shoulders and arms, trying to make sure that he can't get, she can't get pulled under. And all of a sudden it starts becoming a game of tug and war, basically between whatever's under the bed and him. And as he's upside down and he looks under the bed from the upside down perspective, he sees what he describes a forest, hundreds of arms coming out and reaching towards him. And he freaks out and he backs up a little bit. And the next thing you know, as he gets back up on the bed and just on the mattress and looks down at her, he sees all these several dozen arms just grabbing onto her breast and her arms and her shoulders and all these different parts, her face, her neck, and just trying to pull her under. And yeah, things go very, very horrifying after that point. And he ends up being in a very hopeless situation. He's scared as to what might happen. And you get some implications of some very dark things. Also, although you can't see what's happening under the bed in that situation, he reflects on something he saw on the Discovery Channel involving a certain animal that describes potentially what this entity may look like or resemble, and what may be happening to the girl that he loves under the bed as he hears some not so satisfactory noises and crunches and slurps. Yeah, he gets very horrified. He sits there on his bed for hours, much like a shipwreck survivor hanging onto a raft of wood in the middle of the ocean, which is his bedroom, which is very effective description. And he waits until it's daylight. He hears traffic outside. He hears people moving. And although there's daylight, there's now light in the room, so he doesn't have to worry. He leaps out and runs. And immediately he starts going outside and trying to calm himself down. And there's a lot of things that are racing through his head. He's like, I've thought my whole life that my father was a liar, that he was lying about this thing, and that I would try to make sure I wouldn't end up like him. My father was a murderer. I wanted to make sure that I would be nothing like him. That's why I took up social work. That's why I tried to change my life. And then he ends up being wrong about two things. His father was not actually lying in this case, and he does end up being in the same situation that his dad was in all those years ago when he was a kid. And he decides, you know what, I have to do something. He tries to calm down. He tries to, calm and drown out the thoughts in his head, like, why is this thing targeting me? Why did it target my dad? Well, how could this happen? He tries to drown all that out, and he goes to the hardware store and tries to figure out a way to get some equipment to try to kill this thing, because he realizes, well, considering the fact that my dad told me all the details that I need to know, you can't get out of bed without turning on the light. The fact that I saw this horrific form under my bed, the fact that it had a physical presence, that means that it can surely interact with us, but that means in turn, we can interact with it. And he tries to find a way to take care of it. But before he can come up with this Home Alone plan to try to deal with it, he unfortunately ends up running into the police. And he ends up getting sent to the same prison that his dad was at. And he starts, hearing some of the inmates and some of the correctional officers talk about the situation with his dad, talk about some of the things that his dad spoke about inside of there. And then there's a big revelation. There's a huge revelation, in fact, that essentially reveals that this experience that he had may be more than he might have expected. I'll keep it at that. There might be more scale to this event than he might have expected. There's more layers to it. There's a much more deeper thought out story. There's more moving parts and cogs than initially he would have expected. And eventually, the twist at the end of the story is he ends up in a very, very bad situation that he knows he can't escape. He gets driven into madness with all this information overload. And it's all because initially he thought that it was his fault. But no, this is all because of the ankle snatcher. And that's the short story. Me giving the plot without talking about the second half of the story, because I want you to experience that for yourself. What I talked about was the first half. I'm going to leave the second half to itself so you can figure out some things. And I left out some details just so you still get enjoyment out of the short story if you decide to pick it up and read it. I really enjoyed this short story. I don't know what it is, man. I think the Boogeyman might be one of my favorite monsters / creature feature topics in horror, period. One of my favorite short stories of all time, one that I gave a perfect 10 out of 10 score, is Stephen King's The Boogeyman. And I thought that this was going to be in a similar line to Stephen King's The Boogeyman, just for how it was playing out. And there are some similar tropes to it, which is why I kind of enjoy it. But no, it took a much more different approach. There is some, Lovecraftian kind of stuff involving the story. If you couldn't get that from some of the things I talked about, it feels like a mix of Stephen King's The Boogeyman and something that Lovecraft would probably write about the Boogeyman. There's just extra layers to the story. It's really horrific. The monster in this story is absolutely horrifying. I gave you some brief descriptions as to what it may entail, what it may look like, what it may do. One of the cool things that I love is not only the fact that the creature, the Boogeyman in this story, is much more different than any other depiction I've seen of the monster, but that it actually has rules, that's a big part of the story, that this established creature, deity, whatever it may be, it has an established set of rules that, like I hinted in the climax, it may, affect much more than what you initially think. This is a wider scale story than one may expect, and there's a lot of layers to it. The main character, you feel bad for him. He's a sympathetic guy. He was a little kid. He ended up being put into this really bad situation. He got shafted until he got this golden opportunity at a new life, and right when he got it, symbolically and physically, he got his ankle snatched right out from under him. You get the parallel there, that there's the thematic parallel where it's not just this monster is called the ankle snatcher, but it takes away your life. It ruins your life. It breaks you down, and then it preys on you when you're the weakest. And again, when you read the story, you're going to find out the wider scale to this, that it's not just about Marcus. It might be about something more, maybe more people. You don't know. And honest to God, this short story was really, really good. I would say this is a great short story. I really enjoy it. But I think that this should be turned into a movie. If I could choose a story that I really want a movie adaptation for, Grady Hendrix, work with the studio, make this short story into a movie. If you could make this into a movie with a good enough budget, throw in some practical effects and whatnot, I think you can make something really, really fucking cool. You can make a fucking badass story that could have a lot of layers to it, that could impress people, genuinely scare the life out of people. And this story is unique enough to set it apart from other Boogeyman stories in similar nature. So what would I give this short story? I'm going to give this one, I'm trying to think what I should give it, because I haven't even come up with a score yet. But you know what? This is one of my favorite short stories, probably of all time. I'm going to give this a 9.5 out of 10. This is a great, fantastic short story, and I would put this in my Hall of Fame for short stories. Now again, maybe I might lower the score a little bit later on because there is a part involving him trying to deal with the monster initially in the beginning that I thought could have been a really cool Home Alone kind of scene, but it turned into something much bigger. So again, I think I would prefer a fleshed out story, but I would give this no less than a 9 out of 10, but for now I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10. This is a Hall of Fame horror short story, and I recommend all of you guys check it out. Grady Hendrix, you're on my radar to read more of your stuff. And considering the fact you have a book called How to Sell a Haunted House, and haunted house stories are one of my favorites, I gotta read that shit ASAP. That's all I got for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you like this video, hit that subscribe button down below and hit that like button. It's free. It lets me know you guys like the content, pushes my videos out there so that way you guys can experience, learn about these new stories, or feel like you're hearing a friend talk about something that you've already read. So thank you guys for tuning in. God bless all of you. And that's all I have for today. Look forward to the more creature feature book reviews / short story reviews that are dropping for this collection. Deuces.